Hello, darlings. Today I'm coming to you to talk to you about one of Hollywood's greatest sex symbols, coming to you from behind this beautiful flower bush. Me. No, actually, absolutely not. To talk to you about Rudolph Valentino, who seems to really haunt all of Los Angeles. It's remarkable how many different places claim a Rudolph Valentino ghost story. And so let's go into nowadays, even people that are really movie aficionados, a lot of people don't know who Rudolph Valentino is because he came from the silent era, so the earliest of early days of film. And I think it's important to note that this was at a time that movies were new, that the idea of going into a room, a darkened room, and seeing a larger than life face, and a guy that's in a number of movies, a very popular guy, seeing that person over and over and over again, it would, I think people even today have a tough time differentiating. Do I really know these people, these celebrities? They feel like they're my friends. I know them so well. I see them all over. I go into their homes, and all that kind of stuff. Well, imagine in the 1920s when people did not have this experience at all. It was a brand new thing. People got very, very, very attached to Rudolph Valentino. He ended up making, I believe it was 37 films. Some of those early ones where he was an uncredited dancer. He was an extra, basically. But it was not long before he was discovered when he made the movie The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And it was a female screenwriter named June Mathis who was the one that cast him in that movie and changed his life and changed the cinema history and changed paranormal Hollywood history with that move, with that casting decision. Well, unfortunately, his run did not last very long. In a time when, even back then, there were Hollywood scandals that took down careers and whatnot. But Valentino kept his nose clean. There was speculation, actually coming from a Chicago newspaper that kind of very disparagingly and very lowbrow, it was accusing him of being gay, which was a bit of a scandal that he was really ticked off about because he was the great Latin lover. He was the guy that was the romantic lead, and he was the rugged, tough guy as well. And actually, the movie he's most well known for is a movie called The Sheik, which they even actually did do a sequel to called Son of the Sheik. But that iconic face, that profile of him and that desert garb is the current mascot for the Hollywood High School. And of course, it was also the mascot of Chic condoms, Chic brand condoms that I think continued up definitely through the 90s. It's not around anymore, but it went for quite a while because of that connotation of the great Latin lover, Rudolph Valentino, and his iconic role of the Chic. Well, so he is this international star, and he eventually signs a contract with Paramount Studios. He's going to start making the rest of his films with them, and that is why, at this point in time, Paramount Studios buys up a piece of land that was once owned by Hollywood Forever Cemetery. So yes, formerly consecrated land, never a body buried on it, but that's where Paramount Pictures is to this day. It used to be cemetery land. And when Valentino signed that contract that he's going to start working with Paramount, and they're building the lot, they realized that, well, we need to safeguard against all of these fans, these incredibly ravenous fans of Valentino's. So that's why those very iconic gates that are at the front of Paramount Pictures, those were put up because of Valentino. Now, unfortunately for Paramount, for Valentino, for the world, he never makes a film with them because he passes away unexpectedly, very young in New York. He is 31 years old. This is 1926. He went in for a stomach ailment. I believe it was appendicitis. And then he just had one infection after another, and then he just was not able to recover. It was a rough passing. And actually, on his deathbed, he said to one of the doctors, like, "Hey, I'm facing death. Do you think I'm not manly enough?" Again, he really had an axe to grind with this allegation that he was gay at a time where that was not as publicly accepted. So Valentino's gone, but so not forgotten. First off, there was 100,000 people that came out to his funeral in New York. That was actually, it's there was an attempt when he passed away, even though he was the biggest star in the world, he was a spendthrift. Not he's the opposite of that. He just spent it was like water. So did I think it was something like $500,000 in debt in the 1920s, which is rough. So his manager kind of helped stage and hired people to come out and amplify this. What would have already been a big funeral, but it made it even grander. Probably wouldn't have hit 6 digits. And then there was a funeral procession that went across the country back to Los Angeles, and he is buried in Los Angeles, even though he was born in New York. So many things, so many elements to talk about. Oh yeah, well, I mean, when he passed away, it was such a tragic bit of news that people did commit suicide. It's hard to really believe this because journalism was at one of the, not maybe the best points of integrity at this time period. But there are stories out there that 2 girls in Japan jumped into an active volcano upon hearing the news that Valentino had passed away. I don't know if that one's true. It's so over the top, but that's what's reported, so we have to go with it. But there were other suicides across the world as a result of Valentino passing away. In Los Angeles, and there are stories going across America. In El Paso, there was a police barricade put up, and people overtook the police to try to get a look inside the hearse that was carrying Valentino's body. And in Los Angeles, there was even a police officer that died during the funeral procession because of crowds. I think he was perhaps a motorcycle cop. So we did not have the 100,000 people that turned out for the funeral in Los Angeles. The funeral itself was actually very small, but then the procession that went from the church to the cemetery was big. It was the route was lined like a parade route. There were tons of people at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, and a plane actually went overhead and dropped flower petals on the cemetery, which is quite the grand moment. Now, because Valentino died so young and so quickly, unexpectedly, his plans for his death weren't really set so much. So there were some efforts to put together some monuments, but they thought in the meantime, June Mathis, again, who was the screenwriter that discovered Valentino, and they butted heads here or there, but overall they made peace and they were very good with each other. She's like, you know what, I've got a crypt and one next to me at the mausoleum at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. We can put him in one temporarily. Now, she passes away young, as she was in her 40s. She died just a year later. I believe it was a severe stroke, if I'm remembering correctly. And of course, then the stock market crash happens, and finding Valentino a permanent resting spot is a back burner issue. It was a heart ailment, and she was 40 years old. So to this day, Valentino's body lays in the Hollywood Forever mausoleum in a crypt that was never meant to be for him. So where has he been seen since? Again, I alluded to it, everywhere. He's been just all over Los Angeles. And I do wonder if this is a case of, hey, here's somebody that's seen a ghost that's seen. It's a male, dark hair, 1920s era clothing. Well, it must be Valentino. So maybe a lot of people are associating just a ghost of that time period with Valentino, which is kind of one of my beliefs when it comes to Resurrection Mary as well. Since people have seen her at the cemetery itself, they've seen her on Archer Avenue, they've seen her dancing at different ballrooms. There's so many places everybody has seen this one ghost that maybe it is just a similar looking person from a similar time period, and everybody assumes it's Resurrection Mary. So Valentino had his dream house. It already had been built. It was a Spanish style home. And I find it fascinating that we are talking about, I believe it's Benedict Canyon. It is Benedict Canyon, right across the valley from the Sharon Tate Polanski house. So where the Manson family committed their mass murders, and a place, when I was talking in my L is for Los Angeles haunting story, I talked about investigating a house right across the way. So it's just kind of amazing that in such close proximity. Plus, we know that this area is an electromagnetic anomaly zone, a geomagnetic anomaly zone, as identified by the not GPS, GSP, Geologic Society. So it's a place where perhaps, as theories go, it could be more easy for a spirit to manifest. And his place he nicknamed it Falcon Lair, which was named after a script that his wife had written that he was hoping to make one day. Of course, that never came to be, but it was a good name for the house. So this is 1926 when he passes away. Of course, many people have owned the place over the last 90 some years. Unfortunately, in more recent time, I think it was in either the late 80s or early 1993, the last owner of the original house passed away, and then the house itself was leveled in 2006, which is incredible to me because it lasted so long. It should have been protected. Of course, if you're into this kind of stuff, you always want every building to live and last forever, but that's never the case. But many people observed bizarre things going on at that house while it was still there. Most notably, the person that spoke about it a lot, and also the person that lived there the longest, was Doris Duke. She was an heiress to a tobacco fortune, and she and her butler, Bernard Lefferty, they saw Valentino on multiple occasions from the 1950s through the 1980s. And according to her, he made his appearance known. He made his presence known way more frequently when they first bought the house, and then they would still see him on occasion, but it seemed to trail off as time went by. To this day, there are some little bits of the original structure that remain, like the garage is there. I think there's maybe a supporting wall, but really, for all intents and purposes, the house is gone. Now, whoever was that moved in the mid-2000s, we don't know yet if anything has been going on there. I'd very much like to know. The house was actually put up for sale not all that long ago. I think just 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm sure they're not up to talking about it if they're trying to make a sale. But it would be interesting to find out if Valentino's ghost has still been seen. But yeah, I mean, his actual full physical form. And then if you go down the hill, because it was on a perch, and the current structure that's there is on a perch that is on the edge of a valley, overlooks Beverly Hills into Hollywood, or into downtown LA. I guess Culver City would be further south from there. So it is on a perch, which is a great name for Falcon Lair. But if you go down and then get onto Benedict Canyon itself, that is where his horse stables were. He was, of course, this great Lothario is, of course, seen on horseback. And he rode horses in the movies, and he owned horses. He owned stables. Again, 1920s. This is a very much more rural part. You don't have to go back too far before what we now know as Sunset Boulevard is all bean fields. It's kind of incredible how quickly Hollywood became Hollywood. And so people have seen when after Valentino's passing, it remained stables for decades longer. And Valentino was seen down there tending to the real life horses, petting the horses, visiting the horses. And at one point, it freaked out a stable hand so much that he quit on the spot. So I think he was minding his own business, just enjoying horses as he did in life. But some people aren't cool with that. Of course, that stable is gone now. I think there's a house on the property, a smaller house, but probably still $1 million house considering where it is. And people have seen not just a Phantom Valentino now, but they're seeing him on horseback in that area. They've also heard phantom horses. And this is now there's no horses in this area. It's completely motor only type of area. So yeah, to hear horses galloping or whinnying is definitely not something that's the wind is carrying it from somewhere nearby. Let's move on to the Knickerbocker Hotel, which is fascinating that he is seen here. We talked about this in the letter H episode. H is for Houdini, because this is where on the rooftop where the very famous Harry Houdini seance on Halloween took place on the 10-year anniversary of his death. Bess Houdini, his widow, is trying to make contact. This place is just such a history of darkness. So many people have died there. And actually, I don't want to, you know me, I always tend to try to lean towards the light. A really interesting thing is William Frawley passed away there. You know him as Fred from I Love Lucy. He lived in that place for a very long time. I mean, decades upon decades, he lived in that building. And eventually, as he was getting really up there in age, he moved to a easier to access type house, and he had a nurse that lived with him and took care of him as he was getting up there in age. And he actually ended up having his fatal heart attack right there on the sidewalk, right in front of this building that he lived in most of his, for all of his time in LA up until the end. And they brought him inside to try to revive him and resuscitate him, but he had passed away right underneath that big chandelier right in the lobby. This $1 million chandelier, $1 million when it was installed in the late 1920s. It's also where D.W. Griffith had an aneurysm and passed away, also underneath that chandelier. But Valentino was not seen there because he died. He is seen there because it was a hopping place, a great bit of nightlife, a nice little bar there. He was an expert tango dancer, and people have seen him in the lounge area continuing to dance the night away. It's noteworthy because, well, and we'll jump to today. Today, it's an old folks home. The Knickerbocker Hotel is not a place where you could spend the night, which would be so cool. But no, it's an old folks home. If you're checking in, you're staying there for a long time. However, there is a Russian restaurant, very creatively called the Russian Restaurant, that is in the space of the old lounge. And I have gone there. It is one of the best meals I've ever had in my life. I really want to go back. I have no idea what's called what in Russian, and I just pointed to a bunch of objects, pointed to a bunch of things on the menu, and they were all delicious. So highly recommended. And I went there because that's where Valentino's ghost is seen tangoing. We did not see him when I was there, but still good to be in that space. Interesting to be in that space. And on that note, actually, there's a place in New York where his ghost is seen as well. I'm going to try to find it. It is an old studio. Oh boy, do I have this on here? Oh yes, it was the famous Players Lasky Studio. That's where he made a lot of his movies in New York. It's just to the east of the island of Manhattan. And Astoria is the neighborhood, and there's the commissary for to this day it's still a studio. It's where Orange is the New Black was shot, and it's an actively used place. But the commissary that used to serve just the people working on set, now the entrance faces the street, faces the sidewalk, so anybody can go in and have a meal at that commissary. But according to some articles I've read, Valentino is seen sipping a martini there, and perhaps many other iconic, legendary people through the ages, that their presence seems to be felt there. People that talk about it never say it in a dark way, like they get scared there. They feel that it's a place people love to come in life, and they continue to be there after death, which I think that's something that's kind of overlooked a lot when telling ghost stories, that, hey, they're not all bad. Sometimes people like to come back to where they like to hang out. Oh yeah, this is something I actually didn't know, and it's just too bad because I gave hundreds of tours down Hollywood Boulevard. But apparently, Valentino is seen at the legendary Musso and Frank Grill. This is the oldest bar, or the oldest restaurant in Hollywood, and actually this is its 100-year anniversary of being opened. It opened in 1919, and in all that time, I think they've only had something like 4 or 5 main chefs. The people that get a job there when they're young work there till they die. I think the youngster of the group has been there 20 years or something like that. It's just kind of one of those incredible places, and the food is exceptional. And it's a place where Charlie Chaplin's ghost is seen. It's where he used to race his horse against Douglas Fairbanks down a still dirt Prospect Avenue before it was called Hollywood Boulevard. And the loser had to pick up the check, and Chaplin himself is seen there as well. But it's Rudolph Valentino that is seen in the back of the building towards the restroom, still kind of making eyes at ladies. The romance never ends with this one. Oh, and I love this. Even his dog has a ghost that is seen. His favorite dog, and he had a number of dogs through the years, but Kabar is the one that we see him in photos with a lot. We see him with others as well, but Kabar which is Kabar. He is laid to rest at Calabasas Pet Cemetery. This is a place I've been as well. So many unique pets to the stars are buried here. I think perhaps most famously or notably is the MGM lion, Tawny, is also buried here. But there is a plaque to Valentino's favorite dog, Kabar. And people visiting that grave have claimed to hear or feel a dog licking their hand as they're standing there looking at his grave. I think that's outstanding. All right, now cutting to the chase here, Hollywood Forever Cemetery. So the lady in black is a mysterious someone. We don't ever know who. But there is a mourner that comes every year on the anniversary of his death. Black veil, black everything, leaves flowers behind. And she came for decades and decades and decades, to the point that she almost seems supernatural, because we don't know who she is. She just kind of appears and leaves and vanishes. But it was most likely someone paying their respects. But who was she? We really don't know. There's theories about a couple of different women, and one of them, which I think should disqualify her immediately. This one woman claimed to be the woman in black, to the point that she is buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, and on her gravestone it says the lady in black. Is that true? Why wouldn't you have said something earlier? I don't know enough about this to really comment on it, although I guess I'm still commenting on it. So, but every day on the anniversary of his death, which is August 23rd, shout out to my sister. It's her birthday on that day. Every day on August 23rd, there is a funeral. Again, a real life one, not a specter one, not a paranormal sighting, but an actual funeral for Rudolph Valentino to this day. And I have attended this. It is remarkable. It is standing room only in the mausoleum. And people dance the tango. People come up there to recite poetry. There's oftentimes artwork on display, paintings, whatnot, of Valentino. So even though Valentino died, I said 1926, and it is now 2019 as I'm recording this, there will be another funeral, and it will be packed full of people. And odds are, most of those people, like me, hadn't seen one of his movies. And if maybe they've seen one or two, but Valentino, like I said, he made 37 films. A number of those, he was just an extra in the background, so you wouldn't be able to see him anyway. In total, 13 of his movies are lost, just completely gone, as happened very frequently. Fortunately, the number used to be 14 were gone, but one was discovered recently, which is amazing. It was discovered in Europe somewhere, and it was somebody that disobeyed orders, and he collected films, and he was a projectionist, and it was his job after the end of the movie, after the end of the run of airing it, it's his job to destroy the print, and he just kept them. And so often this film stock is so packed full of chemicals that it would rot itself away. For whatever reason, this was preserved and apparently is in very good shape. It's incredible that something else survived from that time period. But getting to the point, nobody alive today can say that they've ever seen all of Valentino's films, but he is still beloved and revered and respected to this day, which I think is a big part of why he's still being seen. His memory is being kept alive by people that are separated by generations from him. Finally, and I would love some more information on this one. I've visited the site myself. I've seen this area, and I've heard people claim that it's haunted, and we don't know why. I shouldn't say we don't know why. We have theories why, but I've never even heard what kind of hauntings, like what is seen there, are things seen there, felt there, what have the experiences been. And I'm talking about DeLongpre Park. This is a small park, a pocket park, maybe a little bit bigger than a pocket park, but very much a small little park in Hollywood that contains a statue that was made for Valentino around the time of his death that was supposed to be part of his gravesite. Of course, as we talked about, the gravesite was never established, was never built up. So now we have the statue. Let's dedicate it somewhere. And it was dedicated. A little ceremony took place in the 1930s in DeLongpre Park. And since then, another statue has been added. It's more of a bust of his face. But the original one is a very Art Deco image of a person standing up. But again, it's super Art Deco-y. It's very much of that era. And actually, his wife, Natasha Rambova, she was one of the main people behind why we loved Art Deco back in this time period. She was I should have talked about her more because she's a very fascinating person. And she and Valentino got into the spiritualist movement. They did hold seances. There are some allegations that she continued to make contact with him after death. We don't really know if that's true or not. I'm sure she tried. But she did eventually publish a book about her life with Valentino. But I think she did that, from what I've learned, so that nobody would ask her anymore. She wasn't actually out to be a glory hound, which is kind of how it sounds. Like, really, you're going to put a book out about your famous deceased husband? The idea was, if I write this book, then everybody has their answers. They can stop bugging me about it. But she went on to become an Egyptologist and was really a highly regarded collector and studier of Egyptian artifacts and what was going on in Egypt. Of course, this was a very hot time to be interested in Egypt, but she had apparently the means to be able to travel and collect, and her collection was, museum worthy. But so there we have it. And I glossed over something that's very important when it comes to Valentino at the Knickerbocker Hotel. Well, first off, in life, it is said that he would come down there, dance and drink the night away until he was absolutely hammered, and then arguing that maybe man's best friend isn't a dog, he would then slump himself over on his trusty horse, and the horse would then walk his drunken ass all the way back up to his house in the hills. Well, how awesome to have a DD like that. The interesting thing about this is that Valentino passed away before the Knickerbocker Hotel opened. So it's not true that he danced the night away and partied at the Knickerbocker Hotel. But it might be a case of people confusing locations in Hollywood. Lots of locations where somebody could dance and drink the night away to this day in this area. Or maybe the idea is that maybe his ghost really is seen there after death. And it's proof that the dead aren't locked in time, that they can continue to go out and gallivant and enjoy the city. And that would be a good reason why. I don't know if it's been a long time since his ghost is seen at the Knickerbocker, but I could see him not going anymore since it's no longer a swanky lounge. It's an awesome restaurant, but it's not a good place for him to continue to tango the night away. So maybe he was going to be seen somewhere else. He's also been associated with a number of different places around Hollywood. There is a building on like Valentino Avenue, Valentino Boulevard, something like that, which is now part of the Paramount Studios complex. But he was associated with the building. He's been seen in the hallways after dark. Oh my gosh, I'm remembering more stuff. Hollywood and Highland, which of course is now the site of the Hollywood and Highland Center, huge, unbelievable mall. And part of this is the Dolby Theater, as it is now, where the Oscars are held every year. Well, long before then, it was the Hollywood Hotel. And people would claim that Valentino would come and visit them at night in their hotel room, and longing young women would get a kiss from the other side, a goodnight kiss. This story appears in multiple places. Okay, let's see where else we have. So that would be in room 264. You got similar stories, including places at Casa Valentino in Oxnard, California, and the Santa Maria Inn in Santa Maria, California. A very frightening version of the story took place in 1988 at that site. At a site, it was rumored to be haunted by the Latin lover. A woman heard someone else in her room breathing. She knew she should have been alone. So this is not a welcome sound to hear in the darkness. In moments, someone jumped into bed with her, fearing the worst. She turned on the lights to find out that she was still, in fact, alone. So often these stories are so positive that people can still get a little kiss from Rudolph Valentino, even though he's been dead for a long time at this point. But now, will those types of hauntings continue to happen, even though a lot less people know who Valentino is, and therefore those really nice stories are horrifying stories? And it's Valentino Place on the Paramount Studios. However, there's some debate over if this was actually a place that Valentino operated, because it's also claimed that he helped run a speakeasy style establishment not too far from here. So again, you get into very old stories. Records are a little shoddy. Memories are even worse. So anyway, he has left a mark all over the place, including, of course, on Will Rogers Beach. which is if you're in Los Angeles, you would be going north up the Pacific Coast Highway, up towards Malibu. Before you quite hit Malibu, you would come across this big beach, and that is where Valentino is seen. What is he doing? What is the Latin lover doing? He's riding horseback on the beach with a rose in his mouth. So thank you guys for watching the letter V. We have just a handful of letters left. And if anybody has any suggestions for W, X, Y, and Z, leave it in the comments here. Head on over to facebook.com/what'syourghoststory. Leave comments there. And just check out what'syourghoststory.com to keep up with all of my travels around haunted America, all over the place. Instagram as well. I'm going to be out in Tahoe very soon, less than a week from now. And we'll be checking out some haunted locations. I was beginning to do research. I saw the Washoe Club is not too far away in Virginia City. And many places in Virginia City. I'm not sure if the Washoe Club is in Virginia City, but there's just so many ghost stories out in that area. But let me know if there's something that you think I should check out while I'm in that area. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.